customers chowed down on White Castle's hamburgers long before there was a McDonald's, Burger King, or Wendy's. Starting in 1921, when Billy Ingram founded it, its iconic White Castle structures adorned cities. However, with just roughly 375 outlets spread across 14 states, White Castle continues to be a niche brand while McDonald's and the other two burger franchises dominate the American scene. Burger King has about 13,000 stores worldwide, while McDonald's has about 37,800. In 1921, in Wichita, Kansas, Walter Anderson and Edgar Waldo Billy Ingram, Sr. established the White Castle System of Eating Houses Corporation. In the same year that the business was properly incorporated, the two men opened their first eatery outside of Wichita. The hamburger on a bun with grilled onions was a mainstay of the White Castle menu. White Castle restaurants have always had a recognizable castle-like appearance. Both Cincinnati and Columbus, Ohio, saw the debut of White Castle restaurants in 1927 and 1929, respectively. Ingram chose to relocate the company's headquarters from Wichita to Columbus shortly after Anderson left the company in 1933. Ingram believed that Columbus' location was more advantageous for his business. In addition, Columbus was already home to the Porcelain Steel Building Company, a subsidiary that built White Castle restaurants. White Castle established a standard of consistency throughout its numerous locations, serving as a prototype for the chain restaurant industry. The business sold bags of hamburgers for a combined price and packaged its hamburgers in individual boxes intended to keep the food hot. 5 hamburgers could be purchased for 10 cents in 1932. For the restaurant franchise, World War II presented difficulties. White Castle had had rapid growth up until the 1940s, but during the war, rationing forced the cancellation of new store plans. White Castle only hired males before the Second World War. The corporation was compelled to hire women for the first time because so many men participated in the wartime military. White Castle System, Inc. is still owned by the Ingram family today. The business has continued to broaden its reach by adding more locations and bringing frozen, microwavable hamburgers to supermarkets. The first White Castle restaurants cook behind the counter was Walt Anderson. Since 1916, when Anderson originally launched his first cafe in a streetcar that had been converted, he had operated food stands in Wichita. As he perfected his cooking techniques, he discovered that if he started with a mound of fresh beef, pressed it into a flat square, then pierced the meat with 5 strategically placed holes, he could cook the burger thoroughly without flipping it. He quickly discovered that grilling the patties on a bed of finely chopped onions, with the bun placed on top, allowed all of the tastes to permeate the bread. Anderson's initial site was successful enough for him to open a second and third. Edgar Waldo Billy Ingram, a competent real estate agent, assisted him in doing area research. As they got to know one another, the two men decided to work together to open Anderson's 4th restaurant. Although Anderson's firm was prospering, he informed Ingram that some people were still against consuming ground beef because of the unhygienic practices in the meat industry that Upton Sinclair's book The Jungle had revealed. Ingram offered a different kind of restaurant as a remedy for this. The two guys decided to title the new restaurant White Castle and design the structure to resemble a miniature White Castle after getting the idea from the castle-like appearance of the water pumping station in downtown Chicago. The interior of the restaurant was decorated with porcelain to emphasize its sparkling clean, all-white appearance, in order to reassure the general public that the food was cooked in incredibly sanitary conditions. The kitchen was also open to the public. When the first White Castle first opened, the burgers were made using Anderson's special grilling technique, and they cost 1 nickel each. The advertisements encouraged viewers to purchase them by the sack. They grew by adding a site in Omaha in 1923. They had established branches in 12 significant Midwest cities before 1930, in addition to New York and New Jersey. The White Castle System of Eating Houses Corporation was formed by them by 1924. Ingram acquired Anderson in 1933 and relocated the corporate office to Columbus, Ohio so that it would be closer to the restaurants he was developing. As he continued to develop fresh strategies to sell White Castle, Ingram appeared to have a marketing gene. Ingram engaged a nutritionist to address women's organizations about the advantages of hamburger in the early years when there was still a widespread belief that ground beef wasn't healthy. Despite this, many people were still willing to speak out against ground beef. According to one author, eating hamburgers is about as safe as pulling your meat out of a trash can while it's hot outside and walking through a garden while arsenic spray is being applied. Ingram had a suggestion for a science experiment as a response. Before the 2004 film Super Size Me, Ingram persuaded biochemist Jesse McClendon to carry out a research project. For 13 weeks, McClendon intended for a subject to consume exclusively White Castle hamburgers and water. A University of Minnesota medical student was the chosen volunteer. At the start of the trial, the participant was quite enthusiastic and frequently ate 10 hamburgers at a time. He stuck with the diet for the full 13 weeks, recording everything he ate in a diary, even though he grew weary of the program's monotony. He was deemed to be in good health when the time was up. He typically ate 20 to 24 hamburgers every day. Some business leaders believed that Ingram's marketing strategy that highlighted the study's findings improved people's perceptions of hamburgers as a whole. The business was a pioneer in the initial application of restaurant newspaper coupons. According to data from Emporia State University's School of Business, the first coupon appeared in a St. Louis newspaper on June 3, 1932. 5 hamburgers could be ordered for carryout for 10 cents. The voucher was a resounding success and contributed to growing the White Castle clientele. It also provided a novel strategy for restaurant promotion. A long-distance carry-out order from soldiers in Beirut was accepted by the business 50 years later because it was still focused on advertising. A plentiful supply of frozen White Castle sliders were flown over by the corporation. White Castle was the first restaurant to use the assembly line system for kitchen operations. Walt Anderson, the first cook, saw that the chain's restaurants need a common method for preparing hamburgers. Additionally, he created standards for employee neatness and appearance as well as a guidebook for food preparation. At the time White Castle was growing, there were no established business plans for managing a chain of restaurants. Ingram started building centralized bakeries, meat processing factories, and storage facilities. A subsidiary named Paperlinen was founded by Ingram in 1932 to produce hats for kitchen staff members as well as other paper products for use in restaurants. This was also a breakthrough for the restaurant industry. Paperlinen was able to supply restaurants all over the world as a result. Paperlinen produced more than 42 million paper hats for numerous businesses in 1955 alone. New restaurant construction immediately rose to the top of the list of priorities. Ingram founded porcelain steel buildings in 1934 to prefabricate the building's sections so they could be transported to a place and swiftly assembled. White Castle deserves praise for initiating National Hamburger Month in 1992, which the whole hamburger industry owes to them. Every year in May, restaurants that serve hamburgers come up with new specials to draw in customers. The Cravers Hall of Fame was launched in 2001 to celebrate White Castle's 80th birthday. Based on consumer stories that exhibit brand devotion, innovative presentation, inventiveness, and enormity of the Cravers are inducted yearly. Tens of thousands of submissions continue to be submitted to the Hall of Fame annually. Hollywood producers contacted White Castle management about 15 years ago and requested their assistance in the production of Harold and Kumar Visit White Castle. It took them some time to decide whether or not to allow White Castle to appear in the film and serve as the late-night hangout for a pair of stoners because they had never been asked for something like this. In the end, they made the decision to give it a shot. The action was a big success and remains a favorite among many young people. With it, White Castle developed a cult following. 420 White Castle eateries are currently open. Despite selling White Castle frozen foods at grocery stores, the company still refuses to franchise. White Castle began using robots to perform part of its duties in February 2023. The fast food franchise revealed intentions to install Miso Robotics Flippy 2 in 100 restaurants. Since the first Flippy was placed in a restaurant in the Chicago area in September 2020, the business with headquarters in Ohio has been experimenting with the robotic fry cook. In November 2021, the first test location upgraded to Flippy 2, and White Castle made the decision to introduce a bigger version of the program. Flippy 2 alleviates the pain points that come with back-of-house duties at quick-service restaurants by taking over the work of an entire fry station, creating a working environment for its human coworkers that maximizes the productivity of the kitchen, Miso Robotics said in a statement. The enhanced workflow enables the redeployment of team members to concentrate on developing memorable client experiences. The privately held White Castle Management Company is the owner of each and every restaurant. Billy Ingram's ancestors are in charge of this company. White Castle has resisted relinquishing ownership as the majority of burger restaurants expand through franchising. In reality, there are no franchises, but there are 2 license agreements with business owners who run 4 locations each in Shanghai and Las Vegas. For more fast food restaurant origins, hit the like button, subscribe, and hit the bell to be notified when new content is uploaded.